Перед началом видео не забудьте
Millions
подписаться на
of
мой
fire
канал и
ants
поставить
of
лайк,
various castes
чтобы видео
swarming
выходили
above
чаще.
ground.
Приятного
The
просмотра.
sight was terrifying. I couldn't look away from the fire ant horde amassing before me. If you were one of these fire ants of the Fire Nation, you'd also be here celebrating with the rest of the kingdom. But I, as their ant keeper, need to ensure my home doesn't become the site of multiple loose fire ant colonies. So I'll get to how I deal with that in just a moment. But first, let's start with the most obvious question you're probably asking yourself. Why is this dude keeping pet fire ants in the first place? Fair question, and the answer to that is, 'cause they're cool. These fire ants have been quite a challenge to keep over the years, but they are currently my most successful ant colony of all my ant colonies in the ant room, the Antiverse. And they also happen to be the most famous, having even been featured on Nat Geo, Discovery, and other big media outlets. They're kind of the GOAT of my collection. The Fire Nation here is composed of millions of stinger-ready ants, living in this 100-gallon half-land, half-river paludarium, called the Selva de Fuego, which simulates for them the Amazon jungle, complete with its own automatic weather system. Each of these ants are only a few months old max, but the one queen who gave birth to each and every single one of these ants has been with me for over 3 long years, constantly laying eggs to keep the population going, living somewhere in the most fortified part of the territories, the mother nest, here. It's crazy to think that the originator of the Fire Nation lives in this driftwood palace, constantly laying eggs, growing this colony bigger and bigger until she dies some 30 years or so from now. It's been years since I've seen her. Amazing, right? If not, okay, perhaps you'll be convinced by the end of this video, or by watching more Fire Nation videos on this channel. Be sure to subscribe so you can join the rest of us and follow them. Alright, the next question you're probably asking then is, obviously, what are you going to do, you foolish ant nerd? The fire ants are breeding and will populate your room once these flying queens mate. Well, to answer that, I first got to explain what exactly is going on here. This was the perfect time to do a quick brief on the amazing fire ant life cycle. So guys, get this. If you were one of these reproductives, aka elates, meaning these big virgin queens or male ants with wings seen here, you were born underground, raised underground by your worker ant sisters, and pretty much did nothing underground, but chilled. No work for you when you're born as an elate. And generally not once do you ever come out of the nest to experience the outer world, until this very important night. Over the past few months, the colony has been eating extra food to be able to meet the nutritional demands of the growing number of elates in the nest. But after tonight, the Fire Nation can finally take it easy with the eating. Now it's important to know that every species of ant has their preferred nuptial flight date and time. For instance, Lasius niger in Europe have their nuptial flight specifically on July afternoons, and pavement ants at around 5 to 6 a.m. in the early mornings in midsummer, North America wide. And as for these fire ants, they fly on a random night sometime at the start of rainy season, here in the Philippines where I live. Now humans don't exactly know what triggers a colony to know when their nuptial flight time is, but we suspect it's a mix of an internal biological clock, environmental cues like humidity and weather, and collective ant pheromones that float through the air throughout a region, signifying to all colonies of that species to fly. Pheromones, by the way, are biological messages produced by the ants' bodies. They're essentially like social media posts that carry very specific messages, and it looks like the fire ants throughout the country have posted and hit the trending tab that it's time for their annual breeding rave. Now every one of these ants has a job. Yes, even the ones who aren't actually doing the mating. Now AC family, this part will truly blow your mind. Let's have a look at the 3 major key players in these ant nuptial flights. If you're one of these virgin queens, you look like this. cherry red with a large head, powerful thorax, and large rounded butt. If you're male, you look like this. Black, more slender, smaller head, and very wasp-like in appearance. Okay, so these queen and male elates are hoping to mate tonight and start new ant colonies of their own. Only thing is, once the mating does happen, the males die, and the females have to worry about pioneering the new colony on their own. The virgin queens are destined to be single, widowed mothers of millions. That is, if they do get to mate. Otherwise, they also die in a few weeks' time. The elates all have the strong urge to climb upwards, up the branches and decor of the territories, and try their best to launch themselves into the air, flying for the very first time, hoping to mate somewhere away from the nest. Ooh, I really hope to catch a male and female mating tonight. For science purposes. Now, as for the ordinary worker ants of the colony, who as you can see far outnumber the elates, they too have an important role during these nuptial flights. The workers swarm above ground at this time to assist the elates along, but more importantly, to protect them at this vulnerable period, because fire ant elates happen to be pretty defenseless, and are a total buffet for a ton of insectivorous animals like birds, reptiles, amphibians, spiders, and even other ants. So with all these elates running about above ground around the nest, the last thing the ants want is a huge bird or animal visiting to eat them. These stinging fire ants running around madly, seemingly for no reason, are in fact Fire Nation Home Security on patrol. And I'll tell you what, I sure as hell ain't sticking my hand into this mess. Nope, nope, and nope. Okay, so now that you know the basics, let's get to what I need to do to control this emergency situation. First and foremost, I needed to do this. A light fixated above the terrarium, so the fire ants would fly towards it, and not anywhere else in my room. The elates happen to be like moths, hypnotized and wired to fly towards the pretty light. This precaution, however, does not guarantee the elates will not fly further and mate at another corner of my ant room and start colonies. But it's a good start. AC family, welcome to the dating pad. The area around the lights and away from the nest, just the way they like it when hooking up. Here we have gathered potential bachelors and bachelorettes, hoping to breed. Ooh, I can't wait to film the fire ant elates mating in 4K. For science purposes. I've never actually filmed it before. And oh, look. Will you look at that? It seems we have a couple who is showing some great interest in each other. They inspect each other with their antennae. Is this the equivalent of ants checking each other out? AC family, what we're witnessing here is the fire ant dating game. But in the end, oh, it looks like the male doesn't meet her standards. Other males come to inspect the female, and oh, I think we may get lucky this time. Or they might, rather. Later, another male showed up. Oh my. There were several moments where it seemed like mating was going to happen. But in the end, the parties involved didn't end up mating. How strange. Another very strange thing I saw was this. A male ant had strangely become stuck to the light. But look, it looks like his male parts were prolapsed. Not too sure how this happened, but oh, this female seems to be quite interested in... Okay, AC family, time to cut away. Actually, seriously speaking now, the thing that struck me while filming this was that the female seemed just as active at pursuing mating. In my mind, I always figured the males just kind of found the females and sort of went in, by force if needed. But no, in the fire ant dating game, the parties are both consensual. In fact, Watching the elates on the dating pad, I was able to get an intimate look at just how gorgeous the queen elates were. I had never before been able to film them this closely and examine the gorgeous detail of their design. Check out how beautiful this fire ant queen is. Aren't they just stunning up close? Do you notice those dots on the top of her head? Those are called ocelli, tiny eyes that I guess help them see light from above them. They look to me like a tiara, sorta. There also seems to be an extra dot on the right there, next to the right eye. But I believe that's a mite, because I do see two other mites on the gaster back there. Yes, ants also have to deal with external parasites. Perhaps these are friendly phoretic mites though, hoping to just hitch a ride to somewhere new. So I stayed up and waited all night, hoping to catch some ants mating. I noticed that elates that didn't nail their landing at the dating pad ended up falling into the Selva de Fuegos river. But don't worry, fire ants naturally float. The duckweed offered ample places to gather, and there were many places to climb back to land. These fire ants were masters of the elements, and it's part of the reason why I love them so much. But in regards to this quote-unquote emergency situation, I knew if I saw dropped wings anywhere in the morning, somewhere on the floor, it meant I was in big trouble. Fire ant queens break off their wings after successfully mating and wander off to find a place to lay eggs and start their own ant colonies. Well, AC family, you won't believe it, but the next morning, this is what I saw. All elates were nowhere to be seen. Looking into the river at the spot where the elates were gathered on the duckweed, not an elate in sight. It seemed they had all retreated back into the nest at sunrise. Looking around the ant room, there were no dropped wings anywhere. Thank goodness. Perhaps elates had flown out the open windows? Who knows? But surprisingly enough, the ants never flew again after this night. It seems this was a one-time deal this year, and we were lucky to catch it right on time, to experience it all together. I just love getting to witness things like this with you guys. Any unmated elates will end up dying eventually of old age, sometime this year in the nest. It's actually the third year in a row that the Fire Nation here has had their nuptial flight in my ant room. And luckily, no fire ant queen has ever established a colony in my home. I believe this is because the only places the queens can suitably create a nest is in any of the terrariums in the ant room. But there's no way the other ant colonies, nor creatures, would allow a queen to infiltrate their territory, without eating her anyway. Fire ant queens can't dig burrows through treated wood floors, and all areas in my home are generally too dry for the queens to establish colonies properly. Plus, my place is full of geckos and spiders that would eat them up in a snap. Everywhere outside of the ant room is air conditioned pretty much all the time, which would kill the queens and any workers in a matter of hours. So luckily, the answer to what I need to do to keep the fire ants from creating new colonies in my home every nuptial flight is nothing. I actually don't need to do anything. But watch this miraculous event that happens every year around the world, with different species, all year round. If you ever wondered how ants reproduce, well, now you know. I'm bummed we didn't get to catch the ants actually
Смотрел до
mating
конца.
though.
Спасибо за просмотр данного
For
видео.
science purposes.